Hello and welcome to Wellness Unplugged. Here we have honest conversations about life, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Lesley, a counsellor with years of experience helping people navigate life's challenges, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. This week we're focusing on something that so many of us struggle with: saying no. Let's be real, saying no should be simple, just two letters, N and O. But the moment we think about turning someone down, something happens. Our stomachs clench, our brains start whispering, "You're being selfish." And before you know it, we're agreeing to bake 200 cupcakes for tomorrow for a fundraiser we never ever wanted to be a part of. So today we'll have a look at why we struggle to say no, the psychology behind the guilt we feel when saying no, where it comes from, why we feel it, and whether we should actually listen to it. And finally, practical ways to say no without feeling like a really terrible person. So grab a cup of tea, get comfy, and let's talk boundaries, brain chemistry, and the nonsense our emotions put us through. So why do we struggle to say no? Well, our biology and evolutionary roots and social conditioning all play a role in why we find it so hard to simply say no. You see, in terms of our biology and evolutionary roots, unfortunately, or in our case, very fortunately for our direct forefathers, our brains are wired for survival. Back in prehistoric times, if you got rejected or kicked out of a tribe, it could literally mean death. So rejection was a huge threat. Your brain's job was to keep you safe, which meant sticking with the group was a survival mechanism. Fast forward to today, and guess what? We don't have saber-toothed tigers to worry about anymore. But our brains haven't gotten that memo. When you say no to someone, whether it's turning down a request at work or not attending an event, your brain still sees it as a form of rejection. Your amygdala, that part of your brain responsible for the flight or fight response, treats it like a life-threatening situation. It's no longer about survival, but your brain reacts as if it is. This explains why you feel anxious or guilty when saying no. The fear of isolation is still there, even though it's no longer actually tied to actual danger. In fact, to put it plainly, your brain is just stuck in the past. What about social conditioning? Well, social conditioning are the lessons we learned as children that help shape how we navigate the world as adults. And from a very young age, we're taught to avoid conflict and to make others feel comfortable. Think about the things you heard growing up. Don't be a tattletale. Don't be picky, just eat it. Don't be a spoilsport. If you don't go, we can't go. Now, at face value, these messages are really all about cooperation, right? But what they also do is create the subconscious belief that saying no is somehow rude or selfish. As children, we are conditioned to believe that being liked and accepted by others is the most important thing. This, unfortunately, can translate into a deep-rooted fear of disappointing people or hurting their feelings. So we push our own needs aside in favor of keeping the peace or staying in the good graces of others. Over time, this fear of rejection becomes ingrained. Saying no turns into something we associate with being a bad person or being selfish. But it's not selfish to say no. It is a necessary part of maintaining healthy boundaries and protecting your well-being. When we say yes to everything, we overextend ourselves, and in the end, we can become resentful or burnt out. Yet that old conditioning can linger, and we may still feel anxious or guilty when we need to say no, even if it's for our own good. As adults, we face pressures that make saying no even harder. At work, team players are praised, and saying no can be seen as uncooperative. We're conditioned to think that if we're not constantly saying yes, we're not pulling our weight. Then there's the social media and hustle culture. We're bombarded with images of people working late and juggling multiple projects, creating the idea that if we're not constantly busy, then we're lazy. Rest gets labeled as unproductive, and it makes us feel guilty for taking a break. Lastly, there's the fear of missing out, FOMO. We say yes to things we don't want to do, just to avoid the regret of missing out on something important or fun. These pressures make saying no feel uncomfortable. And here's the reality. It's not about being selfish or difficult. It's about protecting your time and energy for what truly matters. And yet, when we set boundaries, guilt sneaks in. But not all guilt is bad. In fact, there's a massive difference between healthy guilt, which keeps us accountable, and toxic guilt, which just weighs us down. Understanding the difference can help us navigate our emotions without letting them take control. Healthy guilt is the good kind, the kind that kicks in when you've actually done something wrong. It's that little voice that reminds you when you've messed up, like forgetting a friend's birthday or snapping at a loved one. Healthy guilt nudges you to apologize, make amends, and learn from the situation. It's your moral compass, if you will, and it helps you correct your course. Then there's toxic guilt, the useless kind. This is the guilt that creeps in even when you actually haven't done anything wrong. For example, you might feel guilty for resting because your brain tells you that you should be productive. Or you might feel guilty for saying no to someone because you've internalized the idea that good people are selfless and should always help. Toxic guilt often stems from outdated beliefs we've picked up over time. We might feel like prioritizing our own well-being is selfish, or that we've somehow failed when we don't live up to society's unspoken expectations. The problem is, toxic guilt doesn't lead to growth or self-improvement. It just leads to stress, burnout, and unnecessary pressure. So, how can you tell the difference? Well, healthy guilt is constructive. It helps you recognize when you've hurt someone and motivates you to make things right. Toxic guilt, on the other hand, keeps you trapped in a cycle of self-blame without any real reason to feel guilty in the first place. The trick is to recognize when it's time to let go of guilt that doesn't serve you, and to embrace the kind that leads to positive change. So when should you listen to guilt and when should you ignore it? Well, ask yourself these questions. Number 1, did I actually do something wrong? If the answer is yes, then guilt is working as it should. It's nudging you to apologize, make amends, and do better the next time. But if the answer is no, then what you're feeling isn't healthy guilt. It's toxic guilt. It's time to challenge it. Ask yourself, did I truly cause harm, or am I just conditioned to feel bad for setting a boundary? Question 2. Would I judge someone else for doing the same thing? Think of a friend in your position. If they said no, took a break, or prioritized themselves, would you think they were selfish? Probably not. So why are you holding yourself to a different standard? This is a sign that your inner critic is unfairly harsh on you. Question 3. Am I saying no because I genuinely can't, or because I'm afraid of how I'll be perceived? If you say no out of fear of judgment, that's not a good enough reason. That's toxic guilt manipulating you. But if your no is coming from an honest place, you're overwhelmed, exhausted, or simply don't want to do something, then own it. You don't need to justify your boundaries. However, always be aware of the so-called red flags of toxic guilt. The overgeneralization. I'm a bad person for saying no. No, you're not. One decision does not define your character. Guilt should guide, not label. The all or nothing thinker. If I don't help, no one will. Guess what? The weight of the world is not on your shoulders. Other people are quite capable, and it's okay to step back. They'll hate me if I say no. Hello, people pleaser. If someone's opinion of you changes just because you set a boundary, well, that's their issue, surely, not yours. I know that all of the above is very much more easily said than done. So what can you practically do to stop feeling guilty? A simple trick is to practice self-compassion by shifting your mindset. Instead of saying, I'm selfish, try, I'm prioritizing my needs. Instead of, I'm letting them down, try, I can't pour from an empty cup. Instead of saying, no is rude, try saying, I'm saying no to this, means saying yes to something better. At the end of the day, guilt should guide you, not control you. It should help you grow if you embrace it. But if it's just making you feel guilty for setting boundaries, it's time to challenge your beliefs and move on. So, how do we say no without feeling guilty? Well, the key is in how you deliver it. Let's explore some really practical strategies. The direct no, for when you need to just keep it simple. I appreciate the invite, but I won't be able to make it. I'm sorry, I won't be able to help you with that. No long explanations, no apologies, just a clean, confident no. The kind no, for when you want to soften that rejection. I'd love to help, but I have just too much on my plate right now. I can't this time, but I really appreciate you thinking of me. Maybe next time. Saying no with kindness still means saying no. The humorous no, for when we might need to keep it a bit light. I'd love to, but my couch would never forgive me. I'm on a very strict schedule of doing absolutely nothing this weekend. Doctor's orders. Humor keeps things breezy without inviting negotiation. The buffer method. Need time to think? Well, pause before answering. Thanks, let me check my schedule and get back to you. This buys you a bit of time to decide without guilt-induced panic. The yes but alternative. If you don't want to say a hard no, try, I can't bake 200 cupcakes by tomorrow, but I'd love to donate some ingredients for the next fundraiser. This keeps goodwill while setting boundaries. The broken record technique. If someone keeps pushing you for that yes, repeat your no calmly and firmly. I understand you need help, but I will not be able to assist you this time. No justification, no caving in, just repeat. So, how does one go about building a guilt-free no culture? Well, step one is to overcome common objections. But what if people get angry with me? Well, your reality check on this. Most people respect clear boundaries. If they don't, well, that's their issue, not yours. But I'm really a yes person. Again, reality check. Being a yes person doesn't mean you're necessarily being kind. It means you're a people pleaser. True kindness does often require setting boundaries. But I'll miss out on something. FOMO thrives on fear, not facts. Ask yourself, am I saying yes because I actually want to do this, or just because I don't want to feel left out? Step 2, start small. Begin with low-stakes situations. I think I'll pass on dessert tonight. I'd love to chat, but I can't chat now. Can we chat later? These small no's build confidence for bigger no's. Number 3, journal prompts to reflect on your boundaries. So, what's one thing you've said yes to out of guilt this week? What would happen if you'd said no instead? What's one boundary you can set this week? Step number 4, your support system. Tell a trusted friend, you know what, I'm working on saying no more often. Can you help keep me accountable? because at the end of the day, saying no isn't mean. It's necessary. So let's recap. What have we gone through today? Guilt isn't always a sign that we've done something wrong. Saying yes is only right when it's intentional, not guilt-driven. Saying no is a skill, and like any skill, it gets easier with practice. So, I've set you a challenge for this week. Say no to something without over-explaining. Be confident in just saying no. Just once. Notice how it feels. I promise you the world won't end. Please let me know how you get on with saying no. You can contact me on info@lesleyharvey.co.za or get in touch with South Coast Radio. They have all my details. Next week, we're going to look at why we rehearse conversations in the shower, and we know we all do. We will explore why we do it, the psychology behind it, why we always think of the perfect response after the moment has passed, and whether it actually helps us in real life. I'd like to leave you with this. You are not a bad person for setting boundaries. You are just a person with a life, a schedule, and a right to say no. As Anne Lamott says, no is a complete sentence. It does not require justification or explanation. Thank you so much for joining me on Wellness Unplugged. Until next time, unplug, recharge, and remember, your wellness matters more than you think.
The radio station you can't live without. This is your radio.
This is South Coast Radio.